Hi everyone, this is Jono Bacon and welcome to a new series of videos I'm going to be doing about leadership. Now, this is in conjunction with my friends at the Open Organization who do great work in this area, encouraging open principles being applied into companies. Jim Whitehurst, who is the CEO of Red Hat, who I just have tremendous respect for in the work that he's done, wrote a great book about this as one such example. So, they asked me to put some videos online to kind of talk through some of the principles that I've applied in the work that I do with my clients. And this is what you're going to see. As a tiny bit of background for those of you who are wondering who this balding Englishman is in front of you, I work with companies to help them build communities, either internal to their organization or communities wrapped around an external product or a service. And a huge chunk of the work that I tend to focus on is building leadership in this area and often mapping that leadership to different parts of an organization. So today I wanted to start with the first topic, which is how do you communicate at different layers of a company? This is something that I think bites a lot of people in the backside quite early in their career, where they tend to communicate with different people in fairly consistent ways. And sometimes that's not necessarily the most efficient way to do things. So to start at the beginning, the way I look at it is that there's basically three layers of an organization. Right at the top, you've got the management layer, right? These are the people who are running the entire company, such as CEOs or founders. It could be departmental leads, such as senior vice presidents and things such as that. These people are in charge, effectively. And they also have a relationship with another set of people who are in charge, which is typically the board. So we can kind of lump the board in some ways into that kind of layer as well. But there are some nuances in how you engage with boards. Now, at the lower layer of an organization are the operational staff. These are the people who are doing tactical work. They're building products, they're marketing, that they're selling. These are the people who are on the ground, the ground troops, if you will. And then wedged in between those two layers is a management team. Often known as a middle management team. So these are the people who are often running different departments. So, if you've got a company of 500 people, you typically need to subdivide them up into groups so you can more easily manage and communicate between different parts of the organization. Now, the way in which we engage with those different layers has to be very different because their demands of information at those different layers differs, right? So to give you an example, at the executive level, the CEO is right up there, peering down among all of us. These people typically are dealing with significant decision making, right? They need to make decisions that will impact the entire business, entire teams, entire products. They are responsible for making sure that they can maintain a company where people have invested their livelihoods. So these people tend to operate at a fairly high level because they can't possibly get into every single detail. Right? If everyone at that level was to deal with every single detail that sits below them, they'd be completely swamped and they'd burn out. They'd go crazy. Okay? So at that level, it's got to be high level in nature. The other thing as well is that executives are typically very, very data driven as well, which is, one of the things I've learned from working with a lot of executives is, frankly, as an executive, you tend to deal with a lot of bullshit artists. That is, you get a lot of people who kind of come in, they talk a big game, they sell you on a vision, they sell you on something that doesn't necessarily have any particular reality attached to it, and then it doesn't work out very well. And I think people who become more and more seasoned in their careers tend to look at what is the data that props up this hypothesis. So a lot of people at the executive level will want to, first of all, consume information at a high level, and secondly, make sure that data, that information has got some data that's backing it up. Now, that doesn't have to be, a thesis, because it's got to be high level, but it's still, there's got to be substance to it, and that's really important. I'll talk about that in a second. Now, at the middle layer, at the the middle management layer, this layer, people tend to be very schedule and resource constrained, right? Think about it this way, right? You've got the executives up there. You've got a set of people down here who are doing the work. This is hierarchically in an organization, not in terms of importance or anything. The people in the middle, have to take the orders from above and deploy the resources from below. So these people are very, very focused on schedules and resources and making sure that they can make these balance and make these work. Invariably, middle managers are very, very protective of the scope of the work that they have to operate on. So they want to make sure that if they say they can do something, they can actually do it. And they really want to make sure that they're maintaining their resources effectively to actually execute and deliver that efficiently and effectively, okay? So typically what you tend to get at the middle management layer is people who are often quite conservative, where if you walk up to them and say, hey, I think we should do this particular thing, you'll often get a no before you get a yes. At the executive level, which is much more visionary and much more high level, you'll often get a yes first. Yeah, we should absolutely go and do that. That sounds like a great plan. But for the people who are responsible for the scheduling and the resourcing of the delivery of that, sometimes they're a little bit more reticent. Now, people who are at the lower level, and I hate saying the lower level because it makes it sound demeaning, like these people aren't as important, but in many ways, the people who are in this operational layer are the most important people in an organization. Like when I've been a manager and when I work with management teams, when I'm coaching managers, the thing I always say is, you think you're important as a manager, your team is way more important than you're ever going to be. And it's important that we get that straight right now. But at this level, people at that point typically are all about, they're detail orientated and delivery focused. So this is about getting stuff done. Invariably, a lot of people who operate at this level are given a set of tasks that they need to execute, and they want to execute those tasks in a way that delivers high quality work. So for them, the detail does matter a lot. And this is the nuance between these three different layers, is that at the executive layer, you might have the big vision about a brand new product, for example. At the middle management layer, there'll be a lot of consideration about breaking that vision into pieces and how those pieces are resourced. But at the operational layer, one of those specific pieces, the people at that layer will want to know all of the detail about what's involved in delivering that piece effectively. So how do we deliver information at these different layers? Well, first of all, with the executives, to me, it's relatively straightforward. Is you've got to be able to get over what you're trying to say or what you're asking for in the smallest amount of words, preferably broken into bullet points as possible with data that backs up your argument. Here's a very quick tip. If you ever send an executive, a CEO or a CTO or someone else, an email that's longer than 3 paragraphs, they're probably not going to read it. Okay? So that's the first thing. Break things down into very easy to scan, consume pieces of information. A lot of these people are reading through reams and reams of text and emails every single day. You want to be able to get this over in the easiest to consume way as possible. Think of it this way. Think of your executive team as like Twitter. You know how you try to compress your thoughts into 240 characters or whatever it is that Twitter allows today? Try to think about how you do that with the executive team. Now, for the middle management and the operational layer, it gets a little bit more complicated in my mind, because you really want these two sets of people, these two layers really deeply connected, okay? In many cases, you special case how you engage with the executives to make sure that you can tune what you're talking about to their needs. But at this layer, you've got middle managers who need to deploy resources and make schedules and deliver on them, and then you've got the people who are doing the work, the operational staff. So one of the things I'm a big fan of here is putting in place a synchronous workflow that serves both of those purposes. So for example, that could be that you track features in a system such as Fabricator or Jira or an issue tracker or something along those lines, or some kind of project management system. But then, so the detail can operate in those individual tickets, in those individual discussions, but then they can be taken and slotted into timelines, into schedules, so you can get a much higher operational, a much higher assessment of the resourcing needed at that operational level. This can be as simple as a spreadsheet. Like one of the things I do with a bunch of clients when I'm thinking about projects is to break down the work that needs to happen to deliver something into a spreadsheet, and then to put the names of the people who are going to be delivering the work, who own the work, who deliver the work, who are involved in the work. So you can then start to get a sense of, well, if this individual person is on lots of different lines, then they're probably going to be needed probably too much. So therefore, we should think about how we can utilize them more efficiently. So you ideally want to connect those two layers as best as possible, because the communication between the operational layer and the middle management layer and vice versa is going to be much more closely aligned than, say, the operational layer and the executive layer, okay? So that's kind of how I tend to think of it. Now, if you are, for example, an individual, an operational, like a developer or a marketeer or a salesperson, something along those lines, you want to communicate to someone in your middle management layer, let's say your boss, then I don't think you have to be quite so constrained as you do with the executive layer in getting information to them. You can be a little bit more liberal in what information you provide, because typically people are going to want that level of detail. What you should avoid in all scenarios at any of these layers is massive screeds of information. There is a huge misconception, and I think it typically tends to plague people who are newer in their careers, no matter what age they are, that the more information I provide, the more value I'm demonstrating. That the act of sending an email to someone, the act of presenting to somebody is showing that you're working. It's showing that you're working hard. And invariably that's because of an insecurity that, well, if I don't show that I've done a lot of work, if I only provide 5 bullet points, how does that reflect on me working hard? Well, get that out of your head. That is, it's a nonsense notion, because you can sometimes you can put hours and hours of work that literally go into 5 bullet points if it's crafted in such a way that it gets that message over elegantly and efficiently. So avoid large screeds of text. If you're reaching out to your boss, who is, for example, a middle manager, provide the detail. Again, be data driven, but really focus on schedules and resourcing. Be mindful of them. Of how schedules and resourcing is going to be managed, and how you are trying to be respectful of that as well. Likewise, if you're an executive or you're a middle manager, you're communicating to the operational layer, there's 2 things that I think are really important here. First of all, for the middle managers, if you're communicating at the operational layer, the most important thing that most people want to understand at that point typically is, what do I have to do and when does it need to be done by? And what resources do I have available to me to help me be successful in the delivery of that work? Okay? This is one of the reasons why sprints have become so successful, is that you might have a 2-week sprint where developer A or marketeer A has got to deliver 5 things, say. It becomes very clear in that 2-week time period, this is how you do it. These are the resources that you've got. Now, the thing that the executives need to be mindful of here is, when you're being visionary and you're coming up with ideas for things and exploring how to produce additional value in your company, one problem I see all the time is that an exec may say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And then certain people take that as an instruction. So it's really important, and I think this is also important really at the middle management layer, is to always clarify, I'm just brainstorming, I'm not giving you an instruction here, that there is a clear transition point between idea and an actual execution, this is the thing that we're really going to spend some time working on. So I'm gonna wrap up, because this is already way longer than I actually originally intended, to offer a couple of final tips. The first thing is, when designing how you communicate in an organization, how you communicate to other people, be mindful of the culture. Don't try to put in place a system and a methodology that isn't going to make sense for the people in it. One time I worked with a client to put in place a issue tracking system, like a software issue tracking system for a non-technical company. And it was a disaster. It really wasn't the right choice for them. And we ended up going to something else. But in some companies, that level of detail and that level of kind of asynchronicity, if that's a word, works really well. So be mindful of the culture and what's actually going to work realistically, not just logically works when you write it down. Try to create communications instruments that everybody can understand. What I mean by that is, try not to segment communication between different groups. So one method of communication seems like a mystery to somebody else. It's not surprising that, for example, engineers may communicate, for example, on GitHub or GitLab issues, and you wouldn't expect your marketeers or your salespeople to necessarily understand the content of those conversations, but they should be able to understand how to get at discussions and how to find visibility on some of these different things. And also build a culture around less is more, right? Focus on we want to avoid large screeds of text. If anyone ever sends me an email like that, I usually will say to them, with the greatest respect in the world, I don't believe that this is accomplishing your goal. Having this amount of text is not going to be read. It's not going to get you what you want. And invariably, you can actually trim out 50%. When you get to that point of you have that much content, you can invariably trim 50% of it out. You want to be all killer, no filler. That's the goal that you've got to go for. And the other thing as well, finally, is where possible, digitally document. I've mentioned asynchronous communication already. What I mean by that is preferably provide an infrastructure in your company where people can access anything from anywhere at any time. And the best way to do this is digitally, is have the ability for people to have conversations, to document conversations, to move things forward, to track work in a digital realm, because then it doesn't matter if you're on the road, it doesn't matter if you're in the office. That's the way in which you can do it. It's not just valuable in terms of making sure everybody can access that information, but it's also great for building a history that can showcase lessons around why certain choices were made and how certain decisions were gotten to, which can be very useful, for example, for new employees. Anyway, I've been going now for about 16 minutes, and I planned this on being about 5 or 6 minutes. This is way longer than I anticipated. Who'd have thought that I like the sound of my own voice? So I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you for watching this. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear where you agree with me, but probably more importantly, I'd like to hear where you disagree with me. Tell me where my thinking can be improved. I'm an imperfect human being, and there is still much to learn. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Go and share them in the comments. This is YouTube comments, so be nice. My haircut isn't very nice. I get that. You don't need to tell me. I already understand that. People have told me that multiple times. I know that I wear glasses. You probably don't like that either. So trolls, just if you're going to troll me, just be gentle is kind of what I'm saying. Over and out.